There you go.
17. Okay, so today we're talking about your walk to Emmaus. Emmaus means the burning place. This is the longest post-resurrection narrative in all four of the Gospels. These two disciples are the only ones that's mentioned as actually leaving Jerusalem after the crucifixion. The Greek text says it's 60 stadia or 160 stadia, just kind of depending on which historian and which manuscript you go off of, which is 7 or 17 miles. So it's a 2 or a 5 hour journey. But actually 17 miles right outside of Jerusalem, there's a city called Emmaus, and it has hot springs, which is where the burning name comes from. Okay, Luke 24:13 through 24. The walk to Emmaus that same day, two of Jesus' followers were walking to the village of Emmaus, 7 miles or 17 miles from Jerusalem. As they walked along, they were talking about everything that had happened. As they talked and discussed these things, Jesus himself suddenly came and began walking with them. But God kept them from recognizing him. He asked them, "What are you discussing so intently as you walk along?" They stopped short, sadness written across their faces. Then one of them, Cleopas, replied, "You must be the only stranger in Jerusalem who hasn't heard about all the things that have happened there the last few days." "What things?" Jesus asked. "The things that happened to Jesus, the man from Nazareth," they said. "He was a prophet who did powerful miracles, and he was a mighty teacher in the eyes of God and all the people. But our leading priests and other religious leaders handed him over to be condemned to death, and they crucified him. We had hoped that he was the Messiah who had come to rescue Israel. This all happened 3 days ago." Where did it lead off? Okay. "Then some women from a group of his followers were at his tomb early this morning, and they came back with an amazing report. They said his body was missing, and they had seen angels who told them that Jesus is alive. Some of our men ran out to see, and sure enough, his body was gone, just as the women had said." So, these are supposed to be two followers, two disciples of Jesus. They have been with him for probably the majority of the last 3 years of his ministry. They're walking down the road, traveling to Emmaus, which, remember, means burning place. These two disciples, Cleopas and his unnamed friend, are debating and discussing everything that's happened the last couple of days, which the word that Luke uses for discussing is this word right here. It's "eustateo," which actually translates as tossing words. So in other words, they were arguing. In fact, the only other places where this same word is used in the New Testament is when the Pharisees are arguing with or about Jesus, and when Stephen is on trial. Do y'all remember who Stephen is?
No.
Who's Stephen?
A guy.
Ralph, who's Stephen?
First martyred.
First guy that was killed for believing in Jesus. So some Bible scholars actually believe that Cleopas, the only named disciple guy mentioned here, is actually Jesus' uncle, or it would be Joseph's brother. They also think, according to some commentaries, that the unnamed disciple is Cleopas' wife, who's also one of the ladies that's named Mary, who was a witness at the crucifixion, and coincidentally, she would have been one of the women who seen the empty tomb, which, haha, they're married, and the guys didn't believe the women, so hence the arguing, which would completely make sense. Click, click. There it goes. Okay, Jesus is standing in front of two of his own disciples. They walked with him. They've seen him do miracles. They've seen him heal. They've seen him cast out the demons. They probably witnessed the trial. They've seen the crucifixion and the afterwards. They've seen probably his body get put in the tomb. And I'm going forward too much. I went forward way too much. Okay. And they called him a stranger. They heard the women's account from that morning, probably straight from them, or in case of the some commentaries, maybe one of the people was actually one of the women who seen an empty tomb. What the heck? I didn't even touch it. About the empty tomb and the missing body, along with the sighting of the two angels who had asked them why they were looking for the living among the dead. So the Jewish people believed in a conquering Messiah that would overthrow the Roman government, right? Kind of like in the Chosen show that we've been watching. They think that the Messiah is going to come in and kill all the Romans and have his own army, and they're going to be free and rule and reign, and nobody's going to bother them in Israel. But these beliefs were shattered when Jesus was crucified, but it was a plan all along. Their hopes and dreams were deflated balloons, and they had lost pretty much all hope, which is why they were sad and depressed and hiding in locked rooms and leaving Jerusalem and running away.
You're skipping.
I'm not even touching it.
The middle thing's a mouse.
This big thing?
Yes.
I didn't think I was touching that either. I have a clicker coming in the mail tomorrow. Yay! But the answer to their problem wasn't a Messiah to conquer the Romans. God's plan was for a Messiah to conquer the sin problem that we all have, right? And to bring reconciliation between us and God. So Luke, back to the Bible. Then Jesus said to them, "You foolish people, you find it so hard to believe all that the prophets wrote in the scriptures. Wasn't it clearly predicted that the Messiah would have to suffer all these things before entering his glory?" Then Jesus took them through the writings of Moses and all the prophets, explaining from all the scriptures the things concerning himself. Okay, so Jesus calls his own followers thick-headed, or in some translations he calls them foolish. And then he taught them again all the things that he's already taught them about himself and told them a couple times, because several times he told them that when he went to Jerusalem he was going to die.
That's so sad.
So Jesus, as a stranger that they encounter along the road, goes from not knowing anything about the last couple days of events to telling them everything around it and the history and the past and what's coming on and what's happening and everything like that. But they still didn't see it because they were spiritually blind to everything that was going on. It didn't click in their heads. So Jesus ultimately wants them to know that although the things that we see look hopeless, we can still trust in the plans that God has for us. God spells out his plan for redemption all the way from Moses to John the Baptist and all the prophets in between them. God's plan was accomplished in the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus. Back to Luke. By this time, they were nearing Emmaus, and at the end of their journey, Jesus acted as if he was going to go on. But they begged him, "Stay the night with us since it's getting late." So he went home with them. As they sat down to eat, he took the bread and blessed it. Then he broke it and gave it to them. Suddenly, their eyes were opened and they recognized him, and at that moment he disappeared. They said to each other, "Didn't our hearts burn within us as he talked with us on the road and explained the scriptures to us?" Or in this translation it says, "Stunned, they looked at each other and said, 'Why did we recognize him? Didn't our hearts burn with the flames of a holy passion while we walked beside him?' He unveiled for us such profound revelation from the scriptures." So, they didn't recognize Jesus when they were talking to him face to face. Once again, these were his followers for the last 3 years. They were his disciples. He taught them over and over. Knowing him, or knowing about him and knowing him are two different things. They knew who Jesus was without actually knowing who he was. Once they had that realization that the whole time that they'd actually been talking with Jesus, they realized that their hearts had been telling them that the whole time. God reveals stuff to us through the Holy Spirit that we otherwise would not understand. He will explain scriptures to us because it's his word anyways. He draws our hearts towards himself.
Oh, that's nice.
This is Jerusalem. Modern day Jerusalem.
Can I go there?
Surprise!
Is that today? Now can we get our vaccines?
I don't think it's today.
I won't go
It's a
there.
picture off Google Images. I don't think it's today.
You should have looked it up. Jerusalem. Whenever it is 2021.
Jerusalem.
I want to go
Y'all
there.
Okay,
And
so to recap,
yeah,
why did the disciples try to leave Jerusalem?
they were walking.
Why did they decide to leave Jerusalem?
What?
Why? Why did they leave?
I don't know.
They thought Jesus was dead.
Oh.
And it was the end of the story. So they just went home. the town like 12 times.
Jerusalem.
They were walking from Jerusalem. Where were they walking to? Emmaus.
Emmaus.
No, it's not mayonnaise.
Well, it sounds like it.
Okay, so they were walking to Emmaus, which also means the burning place. Emmaus. When did they leave Jerusalem? What day was it?
May 2000.
Was not a Saturday. It was the day of the resurrection.
Sunday.
That was 3 days after Jesus' death, when the resurrection happened. What were they talking about? Seriously? Do we need to go through the whole slideshow again?
No.
I think we do.
Yes.
What
please.
were they talking about? They were arguing over the events from the last couple of days. So the trial, the crucifixion,
They were discussing.
all of this. They were talking and discussing, and they were very sad and depressed, and they felt very defeated in everything that's not very fun to deal with. Who joined them?
Jesus.
Hey, at least I got one.
Uncle? Savannah said Joseph.
Wow.
Jesus joined them on their journey. Why did they not recognize this stranger when he joined them?
They didn't know
It's in
who
the
he
Bible.
was.
It said it. Luke. No. It was in the book of Luke, but it wasn't because of Luke.
No.
God kept them from realizing it. It was in the Bible. The verse that we read. The first part of the passage. So sometimes the things that we face and deal with in our lives doesn't make sense to us, like the thing that we're moving.
Wow, Jessica.
I don't like this. Sometimes the things we face and deal with in our lives doesn't make sense to us. Even if we know that God's at work, we can still have a difficult time understanding what He's doing, because sometimes what we think God's going to do is definitely not what He starts to do. It's the opposite, exactly. Jesus let them tell Him about their anxieties, about their doubts, about their pain. He let them cry out to Him and express their emotions to Him. Then He taught them and guided them into an understanding while restoring their faith. When they arrive in Emmaus, Jesus acts like He's going to continue on His journey, but the two disciples invite Him to stay with them. When the disciples asked Jesus to stay, it became a decision-making point for their lives. Here is where they went from thinking they knew who Jesus was to actually knowing Jesus. In reality, every single person on earth is going to make the same walk down the road to Emmaus, and it becomes your choice, just like the disciples, on whether or not you are going to invite Jesus over for dinner.
Yep, let's go.
Because in Revelation 3:20 it says, "Behold, I am standing at the door knocking. If your heart is open to hear my voice and you open the door, well, then I will come in and eat feast with you, and you will feast with me." In the Aramaic version, which is probably what John would have wrote the book in, it says, "I have been standing at the door and knocking."
I was gonna
So
say that.
it is, I can't remember the term they use in languages. So Jesus is continually knocking, waiting for you to answer. No, I don't speak Aramaic.
Wow.
Oh, hey,
Tell
bread.
Wow.
Ah!
You just read that.
I had to go see how far it was. Okay, so for the disciples in Emmaus, it took time for them to digest the information that Jesus gave them as they walked down the road. Their burning hearts and their heads had to catch up to the moment where Jesus broke the bread in front of them, and they realized who the person breaking the bread really was, the bread of life. But once they did, they rushed back to Jerusalem to become witnesses of the risen Messiah, who, while they're talking to the other disciples, they're in a locked room, big locked room, and they're talking, saying, "Hey, we just seen Jesus," and then Jesus pops up in the middle of them in the locked room, and they think they see a ghost and scares the snow out of them.
Yeah.
So,
Let's see.
how closely are you following Jesus? Just enough to say I'm a Christian? Could you recognize Jesus if He showed up in front of your face?
Yeah.
Yes.
Are you sure?
Probably
No.
not.
They spent 3 years physically
Ah.
with him, and they still couldn't do it.
No. No.
What about someone who claims to be Jesus?
No.
Could you tell a real Jesus enough to see a real Jesus versus a fake Jesus?
No.
Because in Matthew 24, Jesus specifically says that false Christs are going to come at the end of days, which that's where we're in. And they're going to have fake signs and fake wonders, and Jesus says that even his elect will be deceived, which means people that know him are going to be deceived, which means they're going to fall for the fake.
That bread looks tasty.
It's
That
bread.
bread looks ugly.
I love bread. Bread don't like me.
That's tough.
So, the disciples had a bread-breaking moment with Jesus. They came to the realization that what they had wasn't enough. They surrendered their lives to him when they invited him, and he broke bread in their homes, which was not customary at the time for guests to do. You just didn't go into somebody else's house and break their bread for them at dinner. They did it for you, usually because you're a guest of honor, and that's part of honoring your guest. So we cannot remain complacent in our own walks with Jesus. We have to hunger more for the bread of life every day and surrender our plans, our hopes, and our dreams, especially when they're painful. And we have to have our own bread-breaking moments of realization with and of Jesus. After those moments of surrender, that's also when we can become the witnesses of him that every single one of us is called to be. So what's your bread-breaking moment?
She said you.
What do you mean by that reference? That bread?
Bread. The bread-breaking moment is the point where they realized that that stranger that just walked with them for the 7 or 17 miles, whichever one it was, 2 or 5 hours, and sat down to eat dinner with them. But bread-breaking moment is the exact moment that they realized that they were talking to Jesus. And that what they thought was wrong, and that he really was the Messiah. So what's your bread-breaking moment?
Cut it in half.
That's wrong.
She said, cut it in half. I'll eat it.
That's wrong,
What you
partner.
did?
That's what she said.
Okay. That's a. Yeah.
I'll eat that.
I would.
I will eat it. It's not funny anymore.
Should we go back to the question?
Sure.
Okay, so my bread.
Sure. Sure. Sure.
Okay, Samantha, chill.
Sure.
Samantha,
Sure.
break.
So y'all realize that when you're at camp, that you're not going to be able to jibber jabber and talk during your
No.
sermons, right?
No.
Yes.
So why do you do it here?
Savannah, shh. It's not funny. Shh.
What's your bread-breaking moment? Think about it. Do you have a bread-breaking moment? Because if you don't have that bread-breaking moment, you could be in trouble.
That I saw Jesus.
Did you really do it?
Wow, that's just.
When I say that bread-breaking moment, I mean the point that you really trusted Jesus for salvation. That you really actually knew that he was the Christ and the Messiah and the one that's going to save you from your sin. That's the point of a bread-breaking moment. It's that point where you surrender your life to the only one that can save you. That's your bread-breaking moment. So if you don't have that bread-breaking moment, we need to talk.
That talk.
It's not funny. That's an eternal decision that's going to say whether you are with God for eternity or you're separated from him forever. It's a very serious thing. It's not something to giggle at or make faces at me about. This is the point of the gospel, that Jesus came and died so that we could be saved from ourselves. That's why we come to church every week. That's why we go to youth camp. Nay.
Wow, Haley.
Haley, you can pray us out.
Ah!
Yeah.
She's never prayed.
No.
Yes, I have.
She does too in here. We pray every Sunday, remember?
Can we do it again?
Oh.
Go around.
You're on camera. And it's getting put on everything.
On the YouTube page.
So, you better pray. Out loud, Haley.
She will
No.
smack you.
Haley,
say
Okay,
it.
fine. Dear Heavenly Father, until